Sitting right in the heart of Pennsylvania lies Pennhurst State School and Hospital, a name synonymous with horror, neglect, and restless spirits. For decades, this institution served as a dumping ground for society's unwanted, where the most vulnerable were subjected to unimaginable cruelty. Join us now as we look into the haunting history of Pennhurst. Welcome to Screamville. Pennhurst's story began in 1908, founded with noble intentions to provide care and education for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. However, overcrowding, understaffing, and a lack of resources transformed Pennhurst from a place of hope into a living nightmare for its residents. Thousands of innocent souls endured unspeakable abuse and neglect, their pain absorbed into the very fabric of the building. The year was 1908, and Pennhurst State School and Hospital, then known as the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, first opened its doors. The initial vision for Pennhurst was one of compassion and enlightenment, a refuge for those deemed different by society. The institution's founders envisioned a model facility, equipped with the latest medical advancements and staffed by dedicated professionals. Pennhurst, at its inception, was meant to be a beacon of hope, a symbol of society's commitment to caring for its most vulnerable members. However, the lofty ideals that fueled Pennhurst's creation were soon confronted with the harsh realities of inadequate funding and a rapidly growing population. Almost immediately after opening, the institution began to struggle with overcrowding. Dormitories meant for a handful of people were crammed with dozens, their living spaces cramped and unsanitary. The dedicated professionals who had initially been drawn to Pennhurst's mission became overwhelmed and disillusioned, their pleas for more support falling on deaf ears. At Pennhurst State School and Hospital, patients were often assigned jobs within the institution. These tasks were framed as a form of therapy or rehabilitation, but in many cases, they exploited the labor of residents while failing to provide meaningful benefits to them. The assignments ranged from light tasks to grueling work, often without proper compensation or consideration of the patient's abilities or conditions. Patients were tasked with cleaning the facilities, including sweeping floors, scrubbing bathrooms, and washing windows. Many residents worked in the institution's laundry facilities, washing and folding linens and clothing for thousands of people. Patients helped prepare and serve meals in the cafeteria, often under strict and difficult conditions. Residents maintained the grounds, performing tasks like mowing lawns, raking leaves, and shoveling snow. Pennhurst operated a farm to help sustain the institution. Patients worked in fields planting, harvesting crops, and caring for livestock. Some were tasked with feeding and cleaning up after animals kept on the property. Patients were assigned sewing tasks, creating clothing or repairing garments. Some residents were involved in assembling items, though these tasks were often monotonous and poorly supervised. Simple crafts or handiwork, such as weaving or basket making, were sometimes part of their assigned work. In some instances, higher functioning patients were used as assistants in medical or custodial tasks. This could involve helping nurses care for other residents, often without proper training or consent. Many of the tasks assigned were physically demanding and offered no real benefit to the patients. Instead, they primarily served to reduce operating costs for the institution. Patients were not paid for their work, and it was treated as part of their stay at the facility. Participation was often not voluntary. Refusal to work could lead to punishment or withdrawal of privileges. Many tasks, particularly farm and industrial jobs, were performed in unsafe environments, with patients given little to no protective equipment. The work was rarely connected to any meaningful rehabilitation or skill building, contrary to the institution's stated mission. The dire conditions at Pennhurst led to a gradual but insidious shift in the institution's purpose. What was once intended as a haven for care and rehabilitation transformed into a place of confinement and control. Restraints, seclusion, and physical punishments became commonplace, used to subdue residents deemed difficult or unmanageable. Educational programs were abandoned, replaced with menial tasks and forced labor. Residents were reduced to mere burdens on society, warehoused in overcrowded facilities and stripped of their dignity and hope. The tragic decline of Pennhurst cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the broader social context in which it operated. The early 20th century saw the rise of eugenics, a pseudoscientific movement that advocated for the forced sterilization of individuals deemed unfit to reproduce. This dangerous ideology fueled the perception of institutions like Pennhurst as necessary to protect society from those deemed different. This societal indifference allowed the horrors of Pennhurst to persist for decades, shielded from public scrutiny and accountability. One of the most disturbing practices associated with Pennhurst State School and Hospital was the removal of patients' teeth, particularly those who exhibited behaviors such as biting. This practice is often cited as one of the many abuses that occurred at the institution, highlighting the inhumane treatment of residents. Some patients, especially those with developmental disabilities or mental illnesses, exhibited aggressive behaviors like biting. Instead of addressing the root causes of this behavior, such as fear, frustration, or lack of proper care, Pennhurst staff resorted to drastic measures like tooth extraction. Staff often lacked proper training in managing challenging behaviors. Removing teeth was seen as a quick fix to reduce the risk of injury to staff and other residents. The practice reflected the dehumanizing view of patients as burdens or problems to be solved, rather than individuals with rights and needs. Patients who were deemed biters reportedly had their teeth forcibly extracted without adequate justification or medical necessity. In most cases, patients were unable to give consent, and family members, if involved, were often unaware or not consulted. Given the poor medical conditions at the institution, these extractions were likely painful and may not have been performed with proper anesthesia or hygiene, leading to further suffering and potential complications. The removal of teeth often led to chronic pain, infections, and difficulties in eating. This practice added to the emotional and psychological distress experienced by patients, many of whom were already traumatized by neglect and abuse. Forcibly removing teeth was another way patients were stripped of their autonomy and humanity, reducing them to mere objects to be controlled. By the 1920s, Pennhurst had descended into a nightmarish abyss, a far cry from the haven it was intended to be. The institution, designed to accommodate a few hundred, was bursting at the seams with over 2,000 souls crammed within its walls. Residents, stripped of their names and identities, were herded like cattle into overcrowded dormitories. The cries of the neglected and the anguished pleas for help fell on deaf ears, swallowed by the cold indifference that had come to define Pennhurst. Hygiene, a basic human necessity, was treated with callous disregard within Pennhurst's walls. Bathrooms, inadequate in number and poorly maintained, overflowed with filth. Disease, like a ravenous predator, stalked the overcrowded corridors, feasting on the weakened and vulnerable. The stench of sickness and decay permeated every corner of Pennhurst, a suffocating reminder of the institution's descent into barbarity. The staff at Pennhurst, overwhelmed by the sheer number of residents and desensitized by the constant suffering, became complicit in the institution's descent into depravity. Burnout and apathy were rampant, leading to a culture of neglect and abuse. Residents were left unattended for hours, their basic needs ignored. The cries of the tormented were met with indifference, their pain dismissed as the inevitable consequence of their condition. The horrors of Pennhurst extended far beyond the physical abuse and neglect. Deprived of love, stimulation, and even basic human interaction, many residents retreated into themselves, their minds trapped in a prison of silence and despair. The constant fear, the lack of privacy, and the crushing weight of hopelessness took a devastating toll on the mental and emotional well-being of Pennhurst's residents. The echoes of their anguish, their silent screams for help, continue to reverberate through the halls of Pennhurst. For decades, the horrors of Pennhurst remained hidden behind a veil of secrecy, shielded from the public eye by a culture of silence and denial. However, whispers of the atrocities occurring within Pennhurst's walls began to seep out, carried on the wind by those who had witnessed the horrors firsthand. Former employees, their consciences burdened by the memories of what they had seen, shared their stories with anyone who would listen. Families of residents, desperate for answers to their loved ones' declining conditions, began to suspect that something sinister was transpiring behind the institution's closed doors. The year was 1968. America was a nation in turmoil, grappling with civil rights, the Vietnam War, and a growing sense of social unrest. It was against this backdrop that a young Philadelphia journalist named Bill Baldini received an anonymous tip that would change the course of Pennhurst's history forever. Armed with a camera crew and an unwavering determination to expose the truth, Baldini embarked on a mission that would shake the conscience of a nation. What they witnessed inside those walls horrified them to their core. Baldini's 5-part exposé, titled "Suffer the Little Children," aired on Philadelphia's WCAU-TV in January 1968, and it sent shockwaves across the nation. For the first time, the American public was confronted with the raw, unvarnished truth about Pennhurst. The images that flickered across their television screens were nothing short of horrifying. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Baldini's exposé had shattered the wall of silence, exposing the dark underbelly of institutionalization and sparking a national conversation about the treatment of individuals with disabilities. The public outcry following Baldini's exposé forced authorities to finally confront the horrors of Pennhurst. State and federal investigations were launched, their findings mirroring the gruesome reality that Baldini had captured on film. Lawmakers, shamed by the public's outrage, were compelled to take action, introducing legislation aimed at improving conditions at Pennhurst and other institutions across the country. However, for many, reform was not enough. A landmark legal battle, Halderman v. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, was filed in 1974, seeking the complete closure of the institution and the development of community-based alternatives. The year was 1974. The civil rights movement, having shattered the shackles of segregation, was now turning its attention to the plight of other marginalized groups, including individuals with disabilities. It was against this backdrop of social change that a landmark legal battle, Halderman v. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, began. The lawsuit, filed on behalf of Terry Lee Halderman, a young woman who had endured years of abuse and neglect within Pennhurst's walls, would challenge the very foundation of institutionalization. The Halderman case argued that the conditions at Pennhurst were so deplorable, so inherently inhumane, that they violated the constitutional rights of its residents. The lawsuit asserted that individuals with disabilities had a right to live in the least restrictive environment possible, and to be integrated into society rather than segregated and forgotten behind institutional walls. The legal battle over Pennhurst raged for years, with passionate arguments presented on both sides. In a landmark decision in 1977, U.S. District Judge Raymond J. Broderick ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, declaring that the conditions at Pennhurst violated the constitutional rights of its residents. Judge Broderick's ruling sent shockwaves through the legal system and the field of disability rights. It was the first time a federal court had held that individuals with disabilities had a constitutional right to community-based services. Institutionalization, in and of itself, could be considered cruel and unusual punishment. The fight for Pennhurst, however, was far from over. The state of Pennsylvania, determined to uphold the institution and the system it represented, appealed Judge Broderick's ruling. While the legal battle raged on, the situation at Pennhurst remained dire, with conditions for many residents largely unchanged. The fight for Pennhurst was not just a legal battle. It was a struggle against deeply held societal beliefs about disability and the role of institutions. After years of legal battles, countless hours of testimony, and unwavering advocacy from families and disability rights groups, a settlement agreement was finally reached in 1987. The agreement mandated the closure of Pennhurst and the relocation of its residents to community-based settings where they could receive more individualized care and support. The closure of Pennhurst marked a turning point in the fight for disability rights in America. It served as a powerful symbol of the growing movement towards deinstitutionalization and the recognition of the rights of individuals with disabilities to live integrated, fulfilling lives within their communities. The legacy of Pennhurst, however, extends far beyond the institution's crumbling walls. The Halderman v. Pennhurst case established important legal precedents that continue to shape disability rights law today. The case helped to solidify the principle of community integration, ensuring that individuals with disabilities have the right to live, work, and participate fully in society. The year 1987 marked the end of an era. After decades of unspeakable suffering and a protracted legal battle, the doors of Pennhurst State School and Hospital finally closed for good. The remaining residents, their spirits weary but hopeful, were relocated to community-based settings, marking a significant victory for disability rights and a turning point in societal attitudes towards institutionalization. But what became of Pennhurst itself, the sprawling complex that had borne witness to so much pain and despair? With its purpose extinguished and its residents gone, Pennhurst fell into a state of rapid decay. The once imposing buildings, now silent and empty, were left to the mercy of time and the elements. Nature, as if reclaiming what had been unjustly taken, began to encroach upon the abandoned structures. Vines snaked their way up walls, their tendrils reaching towards broken windows like skeletal fingers. Trees, their roots burrowing deep into the earth, slowly but surely began to dismantle the foundations of a system built on neglect and indifference. In the years that followed its closure, Pennhurst became a magnet for curiosity seekers, urban explorers, and those drawn to the macabre allure of abandoned places. The institution's dark history and the chilling stories of paranormal activity that swirled around it proved irresistible to those seeking a glimpse into the abyss of human suffering. Some approached the site with reverence, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors, a solemn reminder of the lives forever altered within those walls. Others, however, seemed less interested in honoring the past than in exploiting it for thrills and entertainment. The decision to transform parts of Pennhurst into a commercial haunted attraction sparked controversy, with some arguing that it trivialized the suffering of former residents, while others maintained that it served as a unique form of preservation, ensuring that the institution's story, however dark, would not be forgotten. Preservation efforts, fueled by a desire to balance remembrance with respect, focused on documenting the institution's history, collecting artifacts, and advocating for the protection of the site from further decay and vandalism. Today, Pennhurst stands as a haunting reminder of a dark chapter in American history, a stark testament to the consequences of societal indifference and the enduring power of human resilience. The institution's legacy, however, is a complex and multifaceted one, a tapestry woven from threads of suffering, resilience, and the ongoing struggle for disability rights. The stories of those who lived and worked within Pennhurst's walls continue to resonate, their voices echoing through the halls of time, demanding to be heard. The fight to expose the horrors of Pennhurst and other institutions like it helped to spark a national movement for deinstitutionalization, a shift towards community-based care that recognized the inherent dignity and worth of all individuals, regardless of their abilities. Why is Pennhurst haunted? It's a question that has captivated paranormal investigators, historians, and curious visitors alike for decades. The answer, many believe, lies not just in the physical structures themselves, but in the harrowing history they contain. Decades of unimaginable suffering, neglect, and despair have left an indelible mark on this place, an energy that seems to seep from the very walls. Some paranormal experts believe that intense emotional energy, particularly negative energy associated with trauma and suffering, can become imprinted on a location, creating what's known as a residual haunting. If this is true, then Pennhurst, with its long and brutal history, could be considered a breeding ground for such paranormal activity. The countless acts of cruelty, the cries of the neglected, the silent screams of those who couldn't articulate their pain, all of this energy, it seems, has seeped into the walls, the floors, the very air itself, creating a palpable sense of unease that washes over those who dare to enter. The most commonly reported paranormal phenomena at Pennhurst are often attributed to the unseen residents who still roam its halls. Shadows flicker at the edge of your vision. Disembodied voices whisper your name. A sudden chill grips you despite the summer heat. Visitors and investigators tell chilling tales of these encounters. Whispers come from nowhere, sometimes calling your name, sometimes muttering unintelligible phrases. Shadowy figures, often glimpsed out of the corner of the eye, vanish quickly, leaving a sense of unease. Certain locations within Pennhurst are notorious for heightened paranormal activity. These hotspots are believed to be where the veil between our world and the next is thinnest. The Quaker Building is infamous for shadowy figures and disembodied voices. The Mayflower Building is another hotspot, known for the spirit of a young girl named Emily. The tunnels, dark and decaying, are particularly active with cold spots and whispers. If Pennhurst truly is haunted, what keeps these spirits tethered to this earthly realm? The most common explanation revolves around unfinished business. Spirits are trapped due to unresolved trauma or a need for acknowledgement. For many, death extended their suffering, their stories untold. Their spirits linger, needing their stories heard and their suffering acknowledged. Pennhurst stands as a chilling reminder of a darker time in American history, a time when those deemed different were cast aside, hidden away, and forgotten. The institution's story, however, is not just a tale of horror and neglect, but also a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Even within the confines of their confinement, the residents of Pennhurst found ways to connect, to love, and to hold on to hope, however flickering it may have been. Their stories, though often silenced and ignored, deserve to be heard. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity deserves to be honored. And their suffering, a stark indictment of societal indifference, must never be forgotten. The legacy of Pennhurst serves as a powerful reminder that progress is often hard-won, that the fight for justice and equality is a continuous journey, and that the most vulnerable among us deserve our compassion, our protection, and our unwavering advocacy. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks for watching.